All right. Welcome back from lunch. I hope everyone had a good lunch. And we're now going to the afternoon session of our talks today. And so first up, we're going to start off with a talk on science communication from Rachel Lenz. Rachel Lenz is the communications lead for NASA's Geospace Dynamics constellation and is part of NASA's larger heliophysics communication team. She received her master's in science writing from Johns Hopkins University, but is a fan of all types of science communication. She enjoys reading, playing video games, and anything that allows her to be creative and adventurous. She also thoroughly enjoys food and naps, especially if they're spent with her cats and dogs. Same here. So without further ado, please welcome Rachel Lenz.
Hello. I'm just bringing stuff up here so that I can be prepared. Then you'll pepper me with questions at the end. How was everybody's lunch? Hopefully good. Digesting now. Okay. Well, I guess we can get started. My talk, as it says, is on the importance of connection, developing skills with networking and communication. We can go to the next slide. Oh, what? Oh, look. Okay, this is my first time giving like a big talk like this, so I'm used to somebody just sitting there like pressing the button to go to the next slide. So I'm gonna go to the next slide. Look at that. Okay, so before I dive in, I just wanna tell you a little bit more about myself so that you know where I'm coming from here. I am a person who is and has always been insatiably curious. The road to where I am now with NASA has been a winding one. In college, I went through 6 different majors before finally settling on a bachelor's of science in graphic communications, which is essentially like graphic design with some psychology thrown in there. I wanted to design websites, but then I fell in love with the actual developing of the websites. So I became a web developer for 10 years. Then I got kind of burnt out with that, and when I saw that I could get a higher degree in just talking about science, I was like, heck yes. So I did that, my MA in science writing from Johns Hopkins, and then I freelanced for about a year, just writing about lots of different random things. So I wrote about neuroscience for Hopkins International Arts and Mind Lab. I've written about the environment for the National Wildlife Federation. I've written about the physics of light for SPIE optics and photonics. And I've written about space for mental floss. So that's a very, wide, broad view of different sciences, but I felt that it's been really helpful in getting to know how to communicate different sciences, right? And also every single aspect of these opportunities that were given to me were because of connections that I fostered with other people. Okay, so let's start at the beginning here, right? Humans evolved to connect. Our brains are literally wired for this. They evolved for this. So navigating big, socially complex societies is computationally taxing. Oh, I have it here too. Oh, that's nice. Sorry. It requires larger brains to compensate for the load, right? We're always intaking information all the time, but our attention is very small. And so we have to know what's important and what's not important. And then when it comes to social groups, not only are you taking care of yourself, your own needs, you're also trying to take care of the needs of other people, trying to anticipate what they need, to make sure that the group is working well, resolving conflicts that inevitably come up. Bonding in particular with pairs played a key role in the direction of our brain's evolution because in choosing a mate, you have to be very careful that the person that you're choosing will help you, right? They're not going to just leave right away. They'll help you raise your young, and reproduction is very costly, and it's necessary, again, to try to anticipate needs of the other person and trying to, read on an intimate level somebody's, mental state. So those are some of the reasons that our brains are, and the brains of other, what are they called? Anthropoid primates have such large brains because of that social connection. And then when you kind of take a step back and look at how our brains relate to like social isolation and then socializing, when you are feeling rejected, like socially rejected or isolated, it starts the alarm system in your nervous system, right? It triggers that fight or flight in you, and it raises your blood pressure, your heart rate, your cortisol, kind of like what I'm feeling right now. But it's signaling that there is a threat to your person, your very being. Some people will even actually feel pain from being socially isolated. Then on the flip side of that, there's being socially engaged. That releases all the feel-good hormones in our brain, the neuropeptides, the oxytocin, the endorphins. So our brains are wired for connection. So that brings us to exchanging information. Sorry, I'm finding where I am in my notes. So human language evolved anywhere from 50,000 to 2 million years ago, right? It's a very wide range. 2 million years ago is when we developed our modern vocal cords, so they think maybe that's when we started to be able to use language as speech. But 50,000 years ago is when we start seeing like cave paintings. In Indonesia, there's like a warthog or something on a cave, and then in France, I think it is, there's the famous like bison that are just huge and all over the walls. And these are examples of people telling stories, exchanging information through storytelling. Our language evolved to swap social information, morality, navigating physical and our mental worlds, religions. It evolved to communicate our values and our ways of being. It's also intricately tied to symbolism, right? So the ability to draw a bison on a cave wall and then say this thing is a symbol that represents that thing that we saw out there. That is something that not a lot of animals can do. And so because we can do that, that's how we were able to develop language. So when you add narrative to information, it provides context so that our brains can order data, which then builds that mental model and gives us the heuristics that we rely on to survive. We need those shortcuts, those mental shortcuts. That's just because we don't have the time we need to act instantaneously, and so we need to know, saber-toothed tiger means death. So we don't have to test the hypothesis every single time we encounter one, right? Which is never now for us because we live now. But that's the origins of those things. And so also storytelling engages the brain's ability to empathize. And so in doing that, it fosters that connection even more with other humans, so to connect with the emotions and mental states of others. So then the next question that you ask yourself is, okay, well, what is a story? And part of me, we're going back to like 6th grade for some of you, where you had to, write out all the elements of a story and everything. But the definition of a story is literally just a series of events or ideas that are tied together in some way. It is a narrative, so a story is how things change. And so the main elements are, your setting, that's your where, your when, the characters that are involved, that's the protagonist, the main character. There's the antagonist, which is the bad guy, and then there's more the ancillary population in your stories that help or hinder in different ways to move the plot along. So we get to plot, and we have tension and conflict make up the plot. It's necessary in order to have a plot for a story, because without tension or conflict, there is no change, right? Something has to be introduced to a system in order for there to be change. So when you start out your story, you want some sort of a hook. Sometimes in news it's called a lead, L-E-D-E. But it's just something that's innately intriguing, that's captivating to people's attention. You have to provide something that will help people be like, but wait, I want to know more, getting people curious. And then every plot has a climax, right? What is the ultimate thing that your character is going to overcome? And then there's a resolution, which is the character has changed over the course of the story and has now become a different person because of what they went through. And resolutions feel really good. On the right, you see the hero's journey here, which if you are familiar with Joseph Campbell, he came up with this idea. It's also called the monomyth. And so he kind of labels out like 17 different steps that are involved in every good story. So then how does that relate to science, right? Telling a good science story. So if we start with setting, what's the physical location of your story? Is it your lab? Is it your place of business? For me, Goddard Space Flight Center. Is it the atmosphere of Mars? Is that the setting? And then what's the temporal location? Is it the 1600s in London or something? Is it just before Einstein described relativity? Just before some major illumination, or is it the future, like the next 10 years? So what context will you give your audience? If you're writing a research paper can definitely be told like a story. The context would be, where is this research in relation to the other research that's been done? And then there's characters, right? Who is involved? Is it yourself? Is it your co-authors? Your argument that you're making can be considered a character, because you have your argument evolves over the course of your story. So it starts out as one thing, and then it gets introduced to challenges, it overcomes them, and then it becomes something different by the end. And so your plot, what is the sequence of events? It's not just this, then this, then this, though. That's a list, right? That's boring. To create that tension, you need this, but this, and because of this, therefore this, right? So there's ups and downs, there's reasoning, there's motion to your story. So start at the hook. Is there something innately intriguing about the research that you want to open with? Is there a question begging to be answered, right? Like we know of 20% of the universe is matter that we understand, but then the rest, the other 80% is dark matter and dark energy. What are those? I mean, that's pretty intriguing, right? And then there's a climax. The climax occurs about 3/4 of the way through, and that can be your eureka moment, right? Oh, this is what it is. Okay, I get it. And then the resolution, it makes the story feel complete. And so that would be maybe your research conclusion, right? Or maybe if your conclusion is we don't know, that can be an opening for maybe a call to action, and then that can be the conclusion, is to encourage other people to help you find out. I have an example here of one of my favorite science writing stories by Ed Yong. It's called "No One is Prepared for Hagfish Slime." He wrote it in 2019 for The Atlantic, but the hook here is, it expands by 10,000 times in a fraction of a second. It's 100,000 times softer than Jell-O, and it fends off sharks and Priuses alike. Who doesn't want to read that story? It's great because it's got a lot of great science and, lots of visceral writing, and it's also funny, which is just a wonderful combination. Okay, so some tips and tricks. I'm going to pull this up on my computer, since there's a lot of words on there and it's kind of tiny text, so. All right. So I want to read aloud these bad sections first, and then we'll go into the good sections. So this first cell here in the bad section is from, it won the 1998 worst academic writing awards or something like that. And so it was by a woman named Judith something, I can't remember. You can ask me later and I can find it for you. But it's from an essay that she submitted, an academic essay on some feminist criticism. So see how long you can follow along with what I'm saying, mentally here. So the move from a structuralist account in which capital is understood to structure social relations in relatively homologous ways to a view of hegemony in which power relations are subject to repetition, convergence, and rearticulation brought the question of temporality into the thinking of structure and marked a shift from a form of Althusserian theory that takes structural totalities as theoretical objects to one in which the insights into the contingent possibility of structure inaugurate a renewed conception of hegemony as bound up with the contingent sites and strategies of the rearticulation of power. Thank you. Yes, I deserve that. I've read this now, I don't know, a handful of times, and I still have no idea what it says. I lose myself, I think, when I get to hegemony, because I just don't know what that is. I think at one point I knew. So Charlie Eichner, who is a writing professor at Columbia, he decided to take a stab at rewriting this, right? So that one sentence, he broke down into half the size, but 3 sentences. Listen to the difference. Structuralists say capitalism operates as a powerful top-down system, making businesses, schools, and other institutions look and operate the same way. We now think of power as a series of smaller, decentralized interactions. Power does not come from some big force, but from countless interactions throughout society. I had no idea that what is on the left is what's on the right, right? They're wildly different as far as understanding goes. So for some tips and tricks here, one tip is to use an active voice. Don't be passive. Don't be, this happened to this, or don't take the subject, the person doing the acting, out of it entirely, right? We respond to he kicked the ball, right? Or the neutrinos smashed into the atoms, right? That's a good sentence. Not a good sentence is the neutrinos will have been smashing into the atoms for 20 milliseconds as of October 7th, 2023, right? That's less good. It's less powerful, less impactful. Along the same lines is be concise. If you can say something in 3 words versus 6 words, do it. There's really no reason to fill your papers with jargon. It does not make you seem smarter. It makes you seem more aloof, and people won't read it. So then you have to balance accuracy with ease of comprehension. You will have to use a certain amount of jargon, a certain amount of of acronyms, right? My next one is avoid acronyms and jargon wherever possible. You will need to use some of that because you're scientists. And so these words have meaning. Just be careful, be selective in the words that you choose to use. Vary your sentence lengths. These next comparisons here are great. So on the bad side, we have, this sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. And then if you go to the good section, and this was written by an author named Gary Provost, I believe is his last name. In his, I think it's like 100 tips to make your writing better or something like that. Now listen, I vary the sentence length and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences and I use sentences of medium length. And sometimes when I am certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say, listen to this, it is important. The language that is chosen, in addition to the varying sentence lengths, is great, right? You know, he talks about a sentence that burns with energy. I mean, that you can feel that. And he's using analogy or metaphor here when he talks about the roll of the drums and the crash of the cymbals. These are sounds, these are experiences that you've had that you can connect with what is being written here. So those are so important when you're writing a story, a research paper, when you're doing anything to communicate to other humans. And then my last tip or trick is just read, watch documentaries, imbibe the things that you love that are done by people who do it well, right? So like my favorite show on PBS is Nova. They do an amazing job at explaining really complicated topics using graphics as well as interviews. And then, I already mentioned Ed Yong. He's like one of my favorite science writers. Anything Carl Sagan. Richard Feynman is a really great example if you've ever been introduced to his lectures. So just read far and wide because it will percolate into your very being. I have this one, okay. So then the last part of connection is connecting with a network, right? If you don't have a network, there's nothing to connect with. But my view of networking is that I don't think of just going out to network. I kind of view every social interaction as a chance to network, right? As just a chance to get to know somebody and like maybe help them out, or maybe they'll help you out later on. So, be the person that you want in your network. Forward CVs of your friends to potential employers, right, that you know. Share any job openings that you learn about with your network. It could be your social network if you're on like Facebook or Instagram or whatever, or it could just be like you're just texting people, right? And then give personal recommendations. If you know that somebody would be really good for a position, recommend them. So it's like these are the things that whatever you would want somebody to do for you, do for others. The other pieces of advice I have is like have an online presence. I know a lot of people really don't want to deal with being online because it sucks a lot, but it's helpful, especially when you're like looking for a job, to have some space on the interwebs that encapsulates what you do, what you like, what you are like. And then that kind of leads to having business cards. You don't necessarily have to like print them out. I've met a few people who actually they have this like app or something where just they show a QR code and someone can scan it, just get all their information, or it takes them to their website or something. But I think, you know, the last point is just be kind and be yourself. Because when you're networking with people, if you're putting on a face, if you're putting on a mask, it's gonna slip and it's gonna be uncomfortable. So if you are open and honest about who you are and what you want, it goes miles in working with other people. So there you go. That's yeah. There's yeah. If you have any questions, let me know. We probably don't have time now, but
I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions.
okay.
If that's all right.
Okay. Cool.
So I just have a quick question, since is there any students who want to ask first? No? I was just wondering, you gave a bunch of really nice and helpful suggestions for academic writing and how to make it more engaging, and I love the bad example that you started with. But I mean, it seems like a lot of people these days, when they're struggling with how to formulate their ideas and how to present their ideas, the go-to step will be to ask some AI assistant to help them. So what are your thoughts on that? Is that a bad thing to do, or how should people tackle that?
Yeah, so I know this is kind of a hot topic right now. My personal views on AI is I think it's just a tool, right? If you tell it to write something in a certain style and it'll give it to you, and I think you can use that as an example. Don't copy and paste that, but just use it as a guide to be like, okay, so they're doing this, this, and this, then I'm going to try and do it, in my own version. So I think that I think it can be a good guide. It's a tool. It's not the end product, though, definitely. I have my email up there if you want it. I also have like a list of some further readings and some good examples if you want to check it out. I know it's really tiny print, but and then if you want any of the sources that I did not cite on this presentation, you can email me and ask, and I can send it to you. So.
Okay, everybody, let's thank our speaker one more time.
There we go, now it's on. All right, thank you so much, Rachel. We're now going into the Choose Your Own Path part of the day for the next session. So anyone who would like to attend the tutorial, Andrew will be heading over there and leading that, so feel free to head over there. And for those who would like to stay for the career panel, that will be happening now. So if I could invite my career panelists up to the stage and take a seat, that would be great.
Each have a microphone. Okay. I'm gonna sit here. Where are you sitting?
I'll sit here.
Okay, cool. Well, I feel okay. There we go. I want to sit next to Angeline and yeah, there we go. All right.
Now you're doing it.
All right. All right, if you'll give me just 1 minute and I'll be right back.
Based on the number of mics, I expected more people to be up.
I guess you never know in case. Yeah. Surprise other career. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
All right, sorry for the delay. All right, perfect. So, welcome to the career panel for Student Day. I'm super excited for this. Thank you, panelists, again for coming out and getting to talk to us and answer a few questions. So I'll start off by introducing our panelists. First, we have Dr. Angeline Burrell. Dr. Burrell is currently a research physicist at the Naval Research Laboratory, a government lab where she investigates different ionospheric problems from a data-informed perspective. She has previously held research positions in both the US and the UK, and in academia and industry. Next, we have Dr. Lindsay Goodwin. Dr. Goodwin received their BSc in physics at the University of Calgary in 2010, and their MSc in 2014, and PhD in 2018 in physics and engineering physics at the University of Saskatchewan. They were also a CEDAR student rep from June 2014 to June 2016. Afterwards, they went on to fill a postdoc research position at Boston University and the New Jersey Institute of Technology before being awarded the Jack Eddy Fellowship through NASA's Living with a Star program in 2020. They are now an assistant professor at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. And finally, we have Kyle Kremble. Kyle is the division chief for Space Data Networks at the Space Warfighting Analysis Center. At SWAC, SWAC, he reports to the Chief of Space Operations on United States Space Force strategies for delivering communications capabilities in, through, and to space for warfighters deployed around the globe. Prior to moving to the SWAC, Kyle worked at the Air Force Research Laboratory Space Vehicles Directorate at Kirtland AFB, New Mexico, developing and flying small satellite missions for testing hybrid architectures ranging from space sensing to communications. He received his master's degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Colorado Boulder in 2013. During his time at CU, he was the program manager for DRAG, an atmospheric neutral density explorer launched in 2013, and he did his master's thesis on the calibration of the neutral mass spectrometer payload for that mission. So welcome, panelists. Thank you again for coming here. Yes. Wonderful. So I'll start off. I have a few questions here that I was going to start off, get some background, and then we can kick it off onto either Slido, or if people want to ask their questions in person, that'll be great too. So to start off, could each of you please give a quick overview of your current and past, if relevant, career sector? So Angeline, if we could start with you.
Can you repeat the last part of that question?
Yes. Could you please give a quick overview of your current and past, if relevant, career sector? Academia,
Okay.
government.
Yeah, no, thank you. So currently I work in a government research lab. NRL is one of several. We primarily do research, both first principles research, your basic stuff, as well as a lot of things that go into developing technologies or providing operational needs for people in various sectors, like an operational space weather model that could give you forecasts. There are other government research labs that do it and work similar ways, like NOAA, NASA, AFRL, but like we're a sector. In the past, I've worked in academia and I've worked for private companies. My first job back in this field before I got my PhD was being a scientific programmer, where I developed a real-time TEC processing code for a data center. And that's when I learned that Geospace was awesome, and that you could have a career in it. So there's been a lot of different places that I've worked. In academia, I worked in the US at various institutions, and also in the UK at the University of Leicester, and got to know how they got funded a bit. So that's me.
So in 2005, I started my bachelor's at University of Calgary, and I feel like it's mostly just been like, oh, I've been refusing to leave academia, so they just put me into the next stage of academia and the next and the next, and ultimately you keep doing that until you become a professor of some sort. And so that's basically my career path, is that I finished my bachelor's and then I was like, okay, what's next? Well, I like what I did for my bachelor's, so I'm gonna do a master's. Oh, I still like that, so then PhD, like that. So My background is basically completely academia. I took like a year off, and it was garbage between like undergrad and masters. I would have been nice to like work a little bit in like actual industry, but basically what I did was, so I finished my bachelor's and I was like, oh, I should see what the job market's like. Being from Calgary, it was mostly oil and gas. Even if like you're a physicist and stuff, like it's like, oh, do you want to do like seismic work to find more oil and gas, or do you want to make more efficient oil and gas, things like that. And I didn't want to do those things, so I just went back into academia, and that's, I think, basically all I can say about that. Your turn.
Well, so I guess I'm a little bit of an oddball. So I work for the United States Space Force, performing analysis that's not so much what I think folks would think about as like heavy-duty systems engineering focused work on how do you optimize systems. A lot of the work that we do at the center is almost more akin to, I would say, economic theory. It's how do you kind of make critical decisions with incomplete information, and you're really looking for a lot of like the best net value to the operational warfighter, which is a strange place to be. It's kind of a love of engineering from my background, and then also really trying to focus on how do you describe value for those that consume, in my particular case, communication services around the globe for the various operations that they might be a part of. And then in the past, I've had the opportunity to be at Air Force Research Labs, so kind of an Air Force service component to the Naval Research Labs, where we really did focus on that. How do you focus highly on performance and the analysis that goes into the delivery of space systems and their capabilities on orbit? So I've had a nice dynamic range from really stovepipe, I would say, specific to broad perspective and operational context.
Nice. Thank you. The next question is, what does a typical workday look like for each of you?
Ooh, a lot of programming. So usually in a typical work day, well now, I've got 2 days teleworking, 3 days in the office. So let's say it's an office day. Go into the office. Say hi to everyone, because the whole point of going into the office is to talk to other people, not to do as much work as you would at home. And then ideally focus on an aspect of research that involves me having more direct access to like the computers that store the really big data sets I use. Make sure those things are running in the background, make sure nothing's crashed and I have no bugs, do some analysis, talk with other people. One of the things I've been working on is getting or helping some of my colleagues publish their research tools publicly. One of my colleagues, Victoria, recently, last year, she put out a Python version of IRI. So I helped her get her code into a nicer, more accessible version that could be pip installed and put it on GitHub. And now she's doing that with PyIRTAM as well. So we just like published another alpha version of that. So like, please go look at it in GitHub, but like, don't be too critical. And then, other things would be fleshing out proposal ideas, and then, trying to get some writing done during the day. When it's just at home, it's a lot more, what is my current analysis problem? Let's like really dig into that and work on that all day. Or I am working on a manuscript. There's no one here to bug me. Let's work on that all day.
Cool. I'd say that kind of answering your question, I'm going to say my median day. Like if I was to take like 9 to 10 of all the days that I work and like develop a median Dr. Goodwin, what she's doing, or they're like, what's going on at that time, it's usually sitting and writing something. Either like programming or working on a proposal or like writing emails to someone, something like that. However, in all that, like, is usually like dealing with the chaos of like, okay, like there's a fire to put out in that, like, I have a student who's like, maybe not a fire, but like there's a student who's finished a project. Okay, so I got to give them something else to work on. So okay, let's jump to that topic real quick. And then it's like, oh, like my boss wants to talk to me about this sort of thing. Okay, I got to jump over there. Oh, it's related to a proposal that like happened over here. Oh, okay, so now I have to jump. So it's a lot of like jumping around to different tasks. If we look like outside of the median and look into like, I don't know, like the kind of deviations from that, like which are usually what I'm up to is like answering like, or like working with students on like projects, be them undergrad or graduate level. Working also with postdocs, working with like the research professor in my group, and like working on proposals, research projects, things in that I can do. So yeah, I think that kind of answers the question in that, is that like I do a combination of my own research of programming, and like working on papers and stuff, to like working on other people's projects, like giving advice for where it should go next. Doing administrative stuff of like answering emails, making sure that people are actually getting paid and stuff like that. What else do I do in a day? Lecturing. Oh, so depending on the time of the year, it also changes as well. Because if it's during like school, then I'm teaching as well. That's a huge part of my day. Either generating lectures or like actually teaching, or answering emails, either about like content or grades, things like that. So, yeah.
So I think I have a bit of a sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek answer to that question, and then maybe more of a serious one. The sarcastic is put the car roof down and then blast music for 35 minutes into the office to psych myself up. And then PowerPoint all day. No. The more real answer to that, I think my day generally is split into, roughly speaking, thirds in terms of commitment of effort. I am a division chief, so I have responsibilities for managing and mentoring a lot of the junior civilians and military that work for me, so I get to spend a lot of time within their career development prospects. And then I also have the side where there's, as probably you can attest, there's not a lot of billets for the government to just go do it themselves, so we work heavily with a huge contractor base across federally funded research centers, university-affiliated research centers, CEDAR contractors, and so kind of managing a lot of the scheduling and budgetary programming takes up a inconsequential amount of the day, but it pays dividends, because then the part that's really where I love to spend time is the analytics we do. So a lot of what we focus on we call force designs. If you happen to have heard that, each service component effectively says this is objectively what we want our service to be, whether that's the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, or the Army, Space Force, part and parcel to that. And we dive in and try and figure out what are the analytics that derive meaning for what we want that objective force to be for the Space Force in this case. And it's a lot of fun because you're really trying to tie together a lot of the deep engineering with how do you describe value of communications to a warfighter and get that into some analytic. And it's trying to sow the seeds for trees that will grow that you're not necessarily going to spend time in the shade, right? And really trying to create that forecast where you don't know what the ultimate decision is going to be. And then I would say like the last third of the day is how do we communicate that? Sitting around in the session this morning, it's really fun seeing a lot of what some of my original background was in space weather with some of the university projects and Air Force projects. And now kind of transitioning into this role, how do you communicate it and make it digestible to those in the Pentagon or in the acquisition role of a different service component that doesn't have subject matter expertise in space? It's really a lot of fun to have to go through that creative exercise to transition from a heavy physics, engineering dependent observation kind of science into how do you derive value and gain consensus with your contemporaries across each one of the service components? Kind of broken up that way.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. My next question is, what does research or perhaps analytics look like in your particular sector? And in terms of freedom that you have in studying and doing the work that you do, and also how do you get funded? Is that grant writing? Is it through your sector? We could start with Kyle this time, so we can go back the other way.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
So I would say, like, kind of caveat, there's two sets of analytics research that we do. Some of it is, no kidding, deep down in the performance, how do systems behave and how do they deliver capability? The other half is really I would say more what we call campaign or operations modeling. So how do you take those engineering systems and then try and attribute net value to users? And so we spend time largely in both, and both generate volumes of data that we try and work through to communicate, like I was mentioning before. Sorry, you had kind of a second half there.
How much freedom do you have in the work that you do, and how is that funding on you, or is it on your sector?
Gotcha, thank you. So kind of freedom-wise, it's interesting. I think we kind of break the team down into, there's the inside man, the outside man, and the man of action. And the inside man is asking, is this doing the right thing? The outside man is communicating it to the community, and the man of action is making sure, we're hitting our deadlines. In some cases, we bounce myself between all three of them. So I think being a consolidated center, we have a lot of freedom to say, this is the right next question to ask. We also have an element of serving at the pleasure of the chief of space operations. So when the 4-star says, I want an answer for this question, you drop everything and you answer that question. Funding-wise, it's kind of we're not a soft money group. We have a budget that is inlaid within the 5-year president's budget that's released every year. So we're fairly stable, or at least, we're stable in the projections of what we're expected to do and the resources we would have available to accomplish it, which is really nice. We kind of ebb and flow with, is it more money geared towards, say, space sensing type topics or communications topics, or anywhere in between. And it's really based on what are the needs of the joint community.
So I feel that there's a lot of freedom in academia, in that your job is to progress the science and stuff. So kind of the path. Okay, there's a bunch of answers that I kind of want to give. First of all, at my current stage, so I'm new assistant professor, so I still have a startup package. There's still funding through my institution to do whatever. And I have a lot of freedom with that money to basically do whatever. As long as it's not illegal or immoral or things like that, then I can throw money in certain directions to get certain projects started up. If I'm working with a graduate student who is on a TA ship and hasn't transitioned yet to an RA ship, then there's additional freedom of okay, so you're being paid to teach right now, but if you want to do some research during this time, even though you should be focusing mostly on classes, let's start looking at these sorts of ideas for what you could be doing for once you're a research assistant and stuff like that. And so there's that kind of freedom as well as oh, I have an idea. Let's get started in this way so we can start to feel out a project in here. After that, it then kind of, and once I'm off kind of my startup money, it then becomes a function of what kind of grants do I have that are coming in. So for example, right now I'm mostly funded by the National Science Foundation, and I have specific ideas that I've put forward to them saying I'm going to do X, Y, Z in these 3 years. And I'm working on NASA proposals as well, but it would be a similar thing of I'm doing this, this, and this with NASA. But within that, there's still a lot of wiggle room. So for example, I'm working on, I have a grant through the National Science Foundation related to Jim, doing Steve stuff, the thing that's not quite an Aurora sort of signature. But I have certain steps into that project that and certain parts of that that are tangential to that I could then say, oh, well, this is part of that project. So there's still wiggle room within a proposal that I put forward to the National Science Foundation. So I have a lot of flexibility, I want to say, in a bunch of different ways. My boss, he's awesome, really good career advice. He's not watching over my shoulder to make sure that I'm constantly on task. He trusts that I'm on task, but what on task means is there's a lot of freedom in that, if that makes sense. And I think that's the great thing about academia is that you get to make up your own projects, which is pretty cool. So, yeah.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that last thing is there is a lot of freedom in interpreting basic research funding to be applicable. Say, for example, you have funding to look at ray tracing. No one says you have to ray trace on Earth. You can ray trace wherever the heck you want. But the Navy's still funding you to ray trace. So at NRL, we're soft money. But we're very safe soft money in that we have an internal pot of money only available to people at NRL. And that tends to get split up equitably so that no one branch or group in NRL will die, so long as they are still have people in it who are doing research. We can also get money from other areas apart from NSF. So I can go to AFRL and say, I have this idea for doing something that your group is more interested than my group is. How about you send me some money? And they will do that. So, and, you know, like if I wanted to work on something that was, you know, not particularly of interest to NRL at the time, I could go to NASA and get money to do that. In general, the more like basic research you are doing, the more freedom you have to go and pursue ideas wherever you want, because there is the understanding that basic research is exploring fundamental principles in the unknown, so you're not going to end up with a specific end product. You should follow the question where it takes you. So as long as you have a question and you can relate your idea back to the question, you're fine. You know, you can't use your ray tracing money to go off and like scuba dive somewhere and say that you're exploring coral reefs. But, you know, like you can go and ray trace on Mars. Maybe not physically ray trace on Mars, but, you know. So that said, the more you get into the development end of funding pots, the more you are tied to actually delivering a product that is the thing that you said you would deliver. So the degree of creativity and freedom you have varies a lot depending on where your money is coming from. There are a lot of different pools of money.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what does work-life balance look to you? I'm excited for this one.
In the interest of equitable, I think you should go first.
Yeah.
Balance.
Oh, no. I've been getting better at it. I'm really not a good person to like answer questions about this. Yeah, you have to learn when to say no, I guess. And that kind of unfolds in like a bunch of different ways. I'm getting better at it. Okay, so sorry, I'm formulating the answer in my head right now. I'm trying not to work on Saturdays is kind of like my minimum. I have to do a little bit of work on Sunday because like, oh, the upcoming week is gonna, like there's gonna be all these challenges and I have to be ready for them. And then I basically push those out into the world and come back. But yeah, like I'm not very good at a work-life balance, I guess. I do kind of give myself the grace of like, okay, if I'm really tired, and like I don't have a meeting in the morning, I'm gonna sleep in. Cause I'm not gonna work when I'm super exhausted. Things like that. I'm able to like kind of have those luxuries, I suppose, with academia, cause like I said before, I don't have like my boss like breathing down my neck of like, why aren't you sitting at your desk like doing the science? So like you can kind of like find like pockets of time to be like, no, like I'm important right now. I'm gonna take a nap, or I'm just gonna be late, or you know what, I want a coffee, or you know what, I want to leave work early because there's a concert or something I want, and like you kind of make up the time in other places. So yeah, I don't have a good answer for this question. I spend a lot of my time working, but what I'll do, like, or what I can do in academia is like move time around to like make it work for me. Yeah, there's my answer. Finally, it's coming here.
I want to also acknowledge I feel like it's an evolving answer.
Yeah, it's an evolving answer. Is that like I do feel that like I put too much emphasis on work, but one of the great things about academia is that like a lot of time is fluid. And I'm able to like make my own schedule and like make it to how I want just my life to be. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for myself, earlier in my career, I was much like that. after spending 3 years in the UK, I realized that a lot of the reason I had to work very long hours is because I was exhausted. And if I just made sure that I was treating myself more like a human, I could work less and get the same amount of things done.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to get into, especially when you have the peer pressure of everyone pulling the same hour days around you. So normally I work 8-hour days, 5 days a week, and I do not check my email on the weekend at all or in the evenings. And if someone really needs to get a hold of me for like an operational thing, they will do that and they will not abuse that. And because they won't abuse it, then I will, work as needed if an emergency arises. But I also do, there are times when you overcommit, and I just keep track of those hours so that I know when I'm overworking so that I work less at the end to make up for it. Because we only got so many hours in our life. And another thing that everyone is robbing you of when you have a job is your commute. So how I got part of my commute back was I transitioned to biking. So I at least get some physical exercise and outdoor time in when I commute in. Because commuting is part of your frickin' job.
I want to piggyback off something that you said in regards to like peer pressure and like the feeling of working and working all the time. Like there are people in our field who are working way too much, but like I feel like a weird sort of like illusion that happens is that like I'm getting emails all the time. And that makes me feel that like everyone is working all the time. So I'm like, oh, so I better be working all the time. But like really, if I just tracked one of those people who sent me an email and how much they're working, they're probably not like, actually up all the time and working. So because I keep getting flooded with emails, I keep thinking that everybody's doing everything all the time. But no. Like if you track an individual person, it's not that bad. So I have to like kind of separate out that like, no, like it's
Also account that we all tend to work internationally, so you have time zones to consider.
I keep forgetting time zones. That we're not all in Eastern Coast times. They're East Coast times. Anyway, sorry.
Awesome. I feel like I need a guest speaker on this answer. Katie, thoughts? No comments. All right. That's not a good answer. Thanks. It's supposed to be inspirational, sweetheart. So I find it really fortunate. I'm not going to give like so much of an hours-based kind of comment. It's more, I think it's about preserving margin and understanding a lot of what we do as scientists and engineers is really we're milestone driven, right? There's rarely, and I won't say never, but rarely hard schedules, right? It's the milestones we develop for ourselves. And so I think a lot of what I try to value, third parties notwithstanding, is preserve margin. Really understand when do you disconnect to both points. Try and not presume that everybody is going to be working across the globe, across all time zones. I find it really hard myself because I have a team that spans both coasts, and so there's a whole segment of the crew that's starting 2 hours before I do, and there's a whole segment of the crew that stays working an hour after I do in the mountain time zone. And that can be really hard. I completely sympathize with the point you were bringing up. That is just challenging. But kind of thinking about it as milestones, I really value, and what keeps me sane is celebrate the victories. There's going to be the hard days, there's the ebbs, there's the flows, but I think too often we also kind of let the victories just go from right in front of us and celebrating that milestone to it's immediately in the rearview mirror, and we're trying to sprint to the next objective. And really taking that moment and celebrating is important, especially since what we do as scientists and engineers is work with a team. It really creates and forges that bond amongst all of us that kind of makes us resilient to working through the next critical pressure. That kind of keeps us well framed, I would find, most of the time for me, to kind of think about it that way, right? It's, day in, day out, it can definitely become a slog. I mean, let's go back to my sarcastic answer. But being able to see the successes, being able to see those milestones as they roll by and gain a sense of fulfillment from them, and deservingly so.
So one thing that your sense of fulfillment reminded me of is, in going back to your question on like, how much freedom do you have to do things? Is I think most of us at some point have used our personal time to pursue an idea because it was cool and we didn't have funding for it. And like, I think that's fine as long as it is bringing you joy and you are not becoming drained from it. If that is like making you happier, that's part of your life balance, is pursuing cool things.
Yep.
And sometimes you're lucky enough to also like have funding to do that. So you might end up working longer days because working on this project makes you happy and gives you a sense of fulfillment. And I think keeping in tune with like whether you're being drained or whether you're being filled by the time that you're working is important.
Yeah. I appreciated your comment, Kyle, about appreciating your successes. I feel like maybe as grad students, we tend to be our own biggest critics, but it's important to be your own biggest advocate too, and at least try to strike a balance with that. I also very much relate to the time zone question, as being on West Coast time and getting an email at like 6 in the morning when I'm still in bed. I'm like, oh God, I gotta respond to this right now so they don't know I'm sleeping. Yeah.
Don't worry, I get the text messages on my way into the office because people know that I'm gonna get them before I drop my phone off to go in the skiff. It's like I'm a captured audience.
They know you too well. Great, my next question is, what specific part of your background and your training best prepared you for the role that you're in right now? And perhaps we can start with Angeline again, if you've got an answer off the top of your head.
I think my time spent as a scientific programmer was probably the best. At that point, I had to learn how to code in such a way that other people could use my code and that it could run in real time and not break. That's really useful. You know how many... Working now with more people and more scientists, I very much appreciate this training. I've found bugs in every person who has sent me code, even people who didn't believe that they had bugs in it. I'm sure they've also found bugs in mine, but that's why I like sending people my code so that they'll find them. But it's extremely important for answering your science question correctly. This is our method of analysis, and knowing how to write good code, knowing how to write tests for your code, knowing how to make your code readable so other people will know what it's doing has been very valuable to me.
I'm gonna not quite answer your question. I'll like, because I feel like there's things that like, okay, like what prepared me to be in physics? Learning a lot of physics helped. That was good. I'm gonna answer something that like I didn't anticipate would be as helpful, which is like going to conferences and like talking to people. It's like gave me like, I guess kind of a charisma skill of like knowing how to like approach people, like strike up a conversation related to an idea, like getting over like shyness and like seeing a talk and then like approaching that person, like asking them more about it or raising my hand. So yeah, like I would say that like something that's like really helped me with my career is going to conferences, not just because of like what I've learned at the conferences, but just also learning how to like approach people and talk to them and like get them involved in projects. Yeah.
I think so. I feel like I was much more the engineering side and less the pure academic science side. So my take on it is I was really blessed to have a hardware-rich college career and going into kind of junior engineering career as well. Started with at CU Boulder the University Nanosatellite program, which is a project that's run out of Air Force Research Labs, where student teams are defining the military utility of a particular satellite mission that they bring forth, which maybe is a bit of a plug. They're about to kick off their 12th cycle, which is aging me because I was in the 5th. And that was really interesting because as a student, you got to commit to the full life cycle of a satellite program and just mission design in general, going from pure theory all the way to delivery on orbit, as Sophie was mentioning earlier. And that was extremely valuable because going through and understanding where there's sacrifices to be taken, where there's sacrifices that cannot be taken as you try and go through that whole endeavor, and being able to see the fruits of your labor was really, really exciting for me. And then going to Air Force Research Labs as well, straight into another set of called the Small Satellite Portfolio, got to run 6 different spacecraft missions that ultimately launched in just 8 short years down in New Mexico, which is a ton of fun to be able to see that. I know it's definitely a different lens because they were more technology demonstrator type missions, and in that way they were short-lived. But being able to see the full life cycle of those and iterate on them and kind of build the body of evidence and heuristics for myself to get to now the SWAC, where I'm trying to understand, okay, if we deploy this capability, what's the net outcome? That I think is just a huge foundation that allowed me to succeed in this role.
Thank you. And then my final question for you all before we open it up to the audience is, what do you think are some of the pros and cons of your current sector and career role?
Ooh, my pros are doing all of the research. I have to balance it with writing proposals, but that involves doing preliminary research. So like, that's a big pro. That is what I like about my job the most. The cons are the extreme amounts of paperwork and the lack of administrative support. So when you go into academia, they hire loads of people to help you write proposals. They have people to do their budget.
You mean it's not the Excel you just did yourself that morning?
Exactly.
No way.
Excel sheets, but then we give them to the budget person to fix.
You have a budget person who fixes things. You didn't have to look up the memo that had the rates that year and write an Excel spreadsheet. Figure out, because you're the first person who's worked with this specific category of person and ages, how to put them in the Excel spreadsheet. Do export control analysis. There is a lot of paperwork at government labs. It is how we stay accountable to the people.
I'm going to give a similar-ish sort of answer. So the pros of my job is that I get to do research, I get to teach, and I get to do like service work, either to like the institution or to like CEDAR community, things like that. Is that like I'm able to like be in like these circles and stuff. And my institution, like NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, is supportive of me like doing these activities, which is awesome because I don't want a job where I don't get to do these activities. So I'm right where I want to be, and I'm really happy with that. The cons will be like, dealing with students is great, but no, it is great. It is great, but like you have to be ready to deal with like really heartbreaking stories at times. Like what happens when a student needed to leave for like a medical emergency, finish part of the course, wants to then write the final. Like what do you do in that circumstance? You'll be thrown like a lot of different like scenarios in dealing with students that like you weren't necessarily prepared for. And you have to make all those judgment calls. And you can really hurt someone's career if you like make a bad choice or if you make a very vengeful choice, which I've seen like professors like do that of like, oh, like I caught you cheating on a quiz. I'm gonna get you kicked out of the institution because I'm in that position. And it's like, do you want to go that route or do you want to go like a softer route? But you get to like make these choices that can really affect people. There is administrative work. Yes, we do have a budget person, and yeah, like I'm really glad that I don't have to figure out like NSF budgets because that's like it's great, and I understand why all the rules are there. But like I didn't go into this job knowing all the rules, and the rules change like given different circumstances. But like yeah, there's also like stuff at being at an institution. There's admin stuff that's like both important and like stuff that's just like kind of been added on as like footnotes. Anyway, so there's a lot to like figure out, and that's kind of like a con. And I think that over time I'll be better at like all of these things. But yeah, like you can be thrown into like some weird situations that you weren't prepared for, and like every year you'll find something weirder and newer that you'll have to suddenly know how to answer. Yeah.
So I really love the fact that I kind of get this whole perspective. There were definitely like missions that I thought was a real fun passion project, and then just to be told like, we don't really need that. But given essentially no context, now it's kind of, oh, there's some of the context, right? That's kind of that's one of the things that I just absolutely find fascinating in this role within the Space Force. And then also too, being able to learn how every service component consumes space capability around the globe and really understand how we support that mission, because it is not really direct, right? In the grand scheme of things, although you're probably seeing stuff in the public news media where maybe it's a little bit more direct day to day. But it's quite fascinating to me just from the kind of my pure academic curiosity to see all that coming together. I'll admit some of the cons. We have a command hierarchy, and sometimes you are told to shut up and color, and you do your best to color inside the lines. And it kind of comes with that. There is a bureaucracy that there's the level of coordination required when you think about it. The DoD is a massive institution, and we effectively touch all portions of the DoD. When you kind of consider it, if you wanted by analogy to think about it as a tech business, it's the largest tech business annually around the globe, with the amount of investment that goes in between each one of the 6 service components. And we are in a supporting role to all of them, so the amount of kind of crosstalk, consensus, and working with your peers, it takes a toll over time, but it's also, again, kind of going back to one of my previous points, it's really gratifying when you see the success and you see the consensus and mindset of folks who might have been stodgy and in their ways changing. And so I think there's maybe a silver lining to the bureaucracy as well. It gives a really nice demarcation line of when you've won.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you all so much for your thoughtful answers. I now want to open it up to the floor for other graduate students and just people in the audience. I think Bryce has been so wonderful to volunteer to mic run for me. So go ahead and raise your hand. We got a question right here from Vincent.
Oh, my question is, what is one tip of advice you could give to a graduate student or undergraduate student to help them have a successful career, whatever that looks like for them once they graduate?
We're doing these in order?
For an undergraduate student, I would say if you want to go to grad school, and think very hard before you decide that you want to go to grad school. Choose your advisor, make sure you like them, make sure that they want to work with you. For a grad student, hopefully you've figured that out already. To move through your early career, I would recommend to always be looking for a job, always be looking for who you want to be working with next. Funding is short and situations change rapidly. So being able to move quickly is important to stay in the field.
I agree with Angeline's comments. Something I would add is like look for mentors. Because you don't always know how to do everything that you ultimately want to do, but someone can probably tell you how to do that. So looking for mentors, I even at like the undergraduate like stage is good. Like if you want to go to grad school, look for someone who knows stuff about grad school. Probably a professor can like tell you how to do that sort of thing. So yeah, I'd say that's my big piece of advice. Look for mentors. You can always find a mentor at whatever stage you're at. I have mentors right now, things like that.
I was going to go down the mentorship route. No, I mean, just to really reinforce the point, I think it's exceedingly valuable to be able to seek that counsel from those that you look up to at all stages in a career. I mean, those who are impactful in your life are going to come and go. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But being able to have that, and again, who you can seek counsel from, I think is really valuable, especially as kind of a almost pressure offload, right? Being able to have a third party who's coming in that's not emotional, that you can talk to, is one of those areas in terms of like creating, again, margin for your day-to-day career that I just find valuable to this day as I go through mine.
That's great, thank you. More questions from the audience? Well, if not, I'll ask a question then going off of that. Who are some of the mentors that were instrumental in your guys' career progressions?
Go in
So
this order.
the question was like, who were some of the mentors? Like,
Yes,
You want
who?
names?
You don't have to have names, you could just say like a professor
wants a
or
list.
a family member, just anyone who supported you.
No one supported. No.
Group hug after this?
I support you.
You okay?
Okay, so I would say, yeah, in undergrad, I had a professor that got me into research named Phil Langell. He's not in this field, but he just like got me into research. Then through grad school, like I had a PhD supervisor, Jean-Pierre Saint-Maurice, and he gave me a lot of career advice and still gives me a lot of career advice to this day. And then once I moved more into the U.S. community, like I knew Phil Erickson before, like I moved here, but like when I moved from graduate school into like postdoc and like kind of the game had changed in terms of like what I do, like Phil Erickson was like really helpful. And then of course I have Dr. Gerard, like just like I'm pointing out like he's not here, but like the NGIT people are here, and like I think he's a great mentor and stuff like that. And like gives me a lot of like advice all the time. So yeah, those are the names I'll drop right now. There's others as well, like and like there's a lot of people in the CEDAR community. Yeah, CEDAR community. That's my mentor.
I think for me, my master's advisor, and he was also the PI of the university program I worked on, Dr. Scott Palo, who will be here this week. You guys can hang out with him. I've got to go to DC, so I sadly won't. He was fantastic through my undergrad and grad career. At CU Boulder, they had a bachelor-master program, so I didn't want to take the GRE, so I just did 5 years and called it good. Great way to do it. And he was, again, one of those folks that I could seek counsel from. And then also while there, the program was run partly through the Colorado Space Grant Consortium, and one of my now really good friends, Brian Sanders, was the deputy director at the time, and he has just been a phenomenal part of my life even to this day. I still remember this one time, we were in a clean room and we were struggling with something, and it was like literally lifting something, and he's like, set it down and think. And it was both very good physical recommendation of the problem of the time, but also really nice advice for the longer term of just like, you know what, take a step back, think about it, what are you doing? And then now I really value one of my great friends that I've worked with now for 14 years, Dr. David Voss, who is currently my boss, so I guess that's a good thing. But he and I have really grown close together from working at AFRL together, now working at SWAC together, and being able to carpool. We live about 2 minutes from each other, so it's really nice. We get 40 minutes of captured audience each way every day. It's quite fantastic to be able to figure out what good will we do today, what good have we done today, if you kind of think about it that way.
Yeah. So my Rod Helis, who was my advisor, was a great mentor. At a certain point, like the most frustrating thing about going into meetings with him was like showing him a plot and then having him get really excited about the physics and talking all about it before I got to talk about it to him. So I had to learn about talking more quickly and forcefully so that I could say the exciting things before he got to say the exciting things. And then when I came to NRL, I have a very good peer mentor in Kate Zowdy, who, did her PhD while she was working at NRL, and knows the system backwards and forwards, and it's just like, all right, here is how you do this thing, here is how you do this other thing. And so while she's like at the same career level as me, she has a lot of institutional knowledge that she's mentored me on. So, you know, you don't always need to look for mentors in people who are above you in the career structure. Like, look at who's sitting next to you. They can probably help you out too. Another thing that's been helpful for me is not necessarily mentors, but advocates. People who perhaps didn't mentor me, but who put me forward for positions. And that was really valuable.
That's great, thank you. I really like what you said about our mentors don't have to be older and more senior. You could look around and find mentors in the people that were sitting next to each other. And so, yeah, are there any last questions for our panelists? Oh, perfect.
You can go. I just want to say my question is actually on Slido. I think I formulated better there, so.
Yes, here I can read that out for you. If I refresh Slido. I may be looking at the wrong link, but I don't see it. Are you able to read it off the screen?
There'll be some workshop later in this week, and this question will be up there.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I had a question like that too that was never published. Yeah, are you able to read it off? Okay.
It's actually for you, Lindsay. I just want to make clear, this is not my case, but I'm very curious what you think about, well, have you ever been disenchanted by academia? And if so, why have you stuck with it? Alternatively, what is about academia that has kept you on this career path? And I ask this question because there's a lot of people that I know around me that feel like they just want to break apart from academia. And I personally don't feel that, so since you're here sharing with us, I'd like to hear what you think about it.
I do want to say that, like it's difficult for me to say, like, or comment on, like, people leaving academia because I only know my one path and stuff like that. But, like, I do want to advocate in general that, like, if you think that you can be happier in a different state, we're in the U.S. I'm from Canada, and we have provinces. Here they have states. That's not what I mean. Don't move to a different state if you want. Do stuff that makes you happy. I'll just say that. So yeah, if you want to, like, leave academia and go to, like, industry or whatever, like, go for it. Yeah, there's definitely times I get, like, annoyed in academia or frustrated or, like, sad at, like, the end of the day and stuff like that. And there'll be, like, a lot of different reasons why that is. Like, I've been working on a proposal that, like, at the last minute, like, I can't submit, and then that, like, pushes it to the next year or something like that. Like, so, like, internal deadlines, kind of going back to students again. Like making, like a judgment call that doesn't make me happy, like failing students. That sucks. I don't want to fail students, but, like, that's part of my job. I just can't give everyone an A in my class because then that invalidates both my class and the institution and stuff like that. Yeah, so like there are times when I'm, like, frustrated with academia, and there's, like, yeah, I recognize that, like, if I went into industry, I don't have to fail students because it sucks. And there's a whole bunch of other circumstances, but, like, I even despite that, like there's things that, like, I love so much about academia, and, like, part of it is, like, maybe how it's, like, been built up in my mind and stuff like that I think of it as, like, this, like, semi-scholarly, like, haven and stuff like that, where you have that freedom. And, like, that's kind of implied with, like, tenure, that once you get tenure, you have, like, academic freedom to, like, look into different things, and people aren't, like, yeah, people will kind of tell you what to do, don't do anything unethical, you know, or immoral and stuff like that. But, like, yeah, I just really love that freedom and that, like, platform to, like, pursue, like, knowledge and keep going after it. But that's not saying that, like, it's this great thing all the time. Sometimes it's really terrible. Yeah, I hate, like, grading. Sorry, I keep underlining one thing. Like, there's other bad things, but, like, I have to submit grades, like, soon. And yeah, like, so that's really on my mind, is that, like, there's a group of, like, really nice students that I'm like, yeah, sorry, you don't know the material, so I have to fail you. Anyways, I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, for me, so before I went into space physics, I got a master's in cosmology, and it was supposed to be a PhD. I passed the quals, but I had an advisor who didn't like me. I was never going to graduate. I didn't know that, though. So I had to go through the failure process Got a job, picked myself up, kind of like realized that academia is not a meritocracy, that it's a hierarchy. You get rewarded for certain things. Some people got rewarded for things a long time ago. Now they have tenure. They're able to do unethical things. They're able to do immoral things. They're able to do illegal things. And people will not fire them. And sometimes it can be a very dangerous place for you, depending on who you are. Because no one is going to hold them accountable unless you make them. And that's a very hard thing to do as a student. So when I went back in, it's because I really love research, and that was the thing I wanted to do with my life. And I had some time outside of that to reflect on, could I be happy contributing to other people's research? And I realized I couldn't, that it was worth it for me to take the risk to go back again, to be able to answer questions myself. And I learned how to play politics better. I learned how to navigate the system to make myself safer. And when I was looking for positions, I kind of knew what things I needed in order to succeed, because I knew it would not just be on my merits, it would be on people around me, because we all collaborate, and none of us are islands, and we're not achieving these things on our own brilliance. We are achieving things with the support of the people around us, or we're being pulled down by the people around us. So I found a lab that had people who saw my vision and thought it was cool, and saw me as a person and thought I had value. And so that's why I am in a research lab right now. I was agnostic looking at institutions, and this was the institution that had the people that I could see myself succeeding most with. So when you look around and look for your career, look for people who are going to uplift you and who see value in you.
I kind of want to add, yeah, sorry, when I'm saying unethical, I meant like murder. You can't
yeah.
do a murder.
No,
But yeah, there are a lot
you
of
can marry your undergraduate student who you haven't given grades to yet, though, while cheating on your pregnant wife and divorcing her.
Yeah, like
Who was your former student?
I want to acknowledge that there is good and bad things to the tenure thing. Like there is like research that should have the ability to flourish that like people will try and stop you from doing, and academia is a good place for that. But also, you can be just a bad person. So you have that freedom in academia.
Wonderful. Well, I hate to end on that note, but alas, that is our time. So please join me in giving one last applause to our career panel. Really appreciate it. Great. All right, we're going to take a quick 15-minute break. We'll come back at 3:15 for our final session of the day. Thank you.